What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MMB Performance Podcast. I'm happy to have you back. And if this is your first time on this podcast, my name is Jeff Mullen. And today we're going to be doing a full recap of World's Toughest Mudder 2023. And this is my first World's Toughest Mudder, and it was a hell of an experience. By far the hardest thing I've ever done. And I want to give a full recap of this from kind of what World's Toughest Mudder is to the prep for it, to travel, where you have to go, all that goes into it, the day before it, the day of it, and kind of what the strategy was behind that entire race, adversities that we faced throughout this, not knowing what to expect really, because it was my first one. And you can plan a lot for this, but what I've realized in your first one, you really don't know how you're going to respond until you kind of get in the depths of this race. When it gets dark, when it's wet, you're on your feet for 14, 15, 16 hours. It's a hell of a race. And I'm excited to kind of recap this. We're over 2 months now post race, and I think it's given me a really good opportunity to reflect on all the positives, the things that I could improved on, the things that I did well, and what I can do for next year to make sure we crush it. So I'm going to start kind of what World's Toughest Mudder is. If some people that follow me, they don't know exactly what World's Toughest Mudder is. Maybe they saw me do it, or just people that are listening to this that maybe have no idea. So World's Toughest Mudder is a 24-hour obstacle course race. It's basically a 24-hour tough mudder. So what it involves is it starts at noon on Saturday, it ends on noon on Sunday, and you're basically going out there for 24 straight hours. It is a 5-mile course that involves 20 obstacles. I would say over half of them have some type of water involvement. So you're going to be wet from within the first hour to the last hour. So you're going to be fighting this challenge of you're wet, you're cold, regulating your body temperature, trying to find that balance and that mental fatigue that comes from being out there that long and dealing with the water, not only the water, but the obstacles. And I think this is what differentiates World's Toughest Mudder or just obstacle course racing in general, especially at the ultra level, is you can be a good runner, but how good are you from monkey bars, swinging from obstacles, crawling, going through water, getting wet, and doing all these things that are very physical other than just pacing an endurance race and focusing on that. It's a different ball game. And it doesn't mean if you're good at one, you'll be good at the other, but the running does translate. And that's a huge part of this. You have to get time on feet. You have to have your training dialed in. You can't just walk into this and expect to do well if you're not a decent runner. You can power walk and walk yourself through this race and actually put up decent miles. But at the end of the day, if you want to do this well, you have to train to put on some serious miles and build that week over week. And that's kind of what I did is my prep going into this race. I trained for 2 Spartan Ultras in the beginning of this year. So in May of 2023, I had a Spartan Ultra, which is a 30-mile, 60 obstacle course race, which I did the one in Vernon, New Jersey, which again, about 10,000 feet of elevation, 30 miles, 60 obstacles. So it's a version of Tough Mudder, but less water, less mud, thus the name. So I prepped for that one, and I thought I did pretty well in that one. I hit the goal that I had. But coming out of that one, it gave me like 6 months to prep for World's Toughest. And what I did is I also, going into World's Toughest, had another Spartan Ultra right before it. So about a month before this World's Toughest Mudder, I had another 30-mile Spartan Ultra, which I think was a good prep for me to build into this because it let me peak about a month before with a 32-ish mile race. And then I had about 3 weeks of tapering into World's Toughest. And at that point, I didn't do crazy mileage. I was only running 3 days a week. I had one day where I was doing like a stair climber session. So really 4 cardio days, and I had 3 lifting days. So I was doing something every day, but I kind of mixed and matched from a cardio day to a strength day. Now, going into the race, like I said, that was my big 3. I think I got up to my biggest weeks were like the low 40s in mileage. So it wasn't a crazy amount of mileage overall. And knowing my longest run would have been these Spartan Ultras going into Worlds with that expectation to put up potentially a big number. So going into this race, that was kind of how I prepped it. 3 days a week of lifting, 4 days a week of cardio, and peaking about 3 to 4 weeks out, and then tapering into this race. Now, when this race came about, I had a few different goals that I wanted to put in place. One was to put up 50 miles. Number one, honestly, if we're being serious, I just wanted to finish this race, number one, because this was never doing one of these. It put me in a different headspace and a different comfort zone. And when you take on some challenge like this, that's this big and out of your comfort zone, you've done an ultra maybe, or you've done a marathon, but being on your feet, I think the longest I was on my feet was like just about 10 hours. And that was only a month before this race. And to fathom being on your feet for another 20, 24 hours total, but another like 14 is pretty wild. So that was a whole mental game. Knowing that you're probably going to double your mileage so potentially if I hit my goal. So one being to get through this race and survive it. Number two, to put up 50 miles. And then my third goal was to put up 75. So that was like my big goal. But the expectations were to just finish and get to 50. Deep down, though, I did want that 75-mile finisher. And the reason being is you get a 50-mile bib at the 50-mile mark, and then you get a 75-mile bib at the 75-mile mark. There's no in between. So if you walk away from this, you get your medal for finishing the race, and then you get that bib. And I really wanted that 75-mile bib. So those were kind of my expectations going in, but not knowing really what it was. So we fly out to Texas where this race was. I'm from Connecticut. So it was a decent flight out to Texas. And, we got there on a Thursday, which basically gave us Friday to set up our tent and camp and kind of check out the venue. And then the race was Saturday at noon. So we got in there, got settled in, went to the grocery store. It was packed because you got all these racers basically picking up last minute things and all their food the Friday before the race or the Thursday before the race. You're trying to pick up things you can't fly with. And that's a whole nother debacle in itself is, if you're flying out here, there's only so much you can pack and bring with you. So you're trying to get coolers and all this kind of stuff at the grocery store. Unless you were some crazy people. And I say this crazy in the best way, but some of these people were driving like 14 hours, 15 hours in their vehicles so they could bring all their stuff. And the last thing in the entire world I want to do is drive home after this kind of event, knowing I'm going to be trashed to hell, underslept, probably up 30 plus hours. So my expectations is I'm going to spend a little extra money. I'm going to fly down and I'm not going to wreck myself trying to be stiff on this adventure back. Nonetheless, coming down and being absolutely exhausted. So that was my plan. So we flew out, got there, like I said, on Thursday, got the groceries, set up the tents on Saturday. And that's when it's a cool experience because now you start to see everybody down there. Everyone's pulling in. You're talking with people. The energy is so high on that Friday before the race. Everyone's super nice, super kind, and just getting pumped up, taking pictures, having conversations. And you're trying to, now you're meeting people. And honestly, the environment there is incredible. And I think that's one of the cool parts is everyone's so excited and supportive, and everyone wants, making predictions of what they can do and how much they're going to put up. And I think that's incredible. And it's so cool to see everyone's different why behind they're doing this race. For me, it was just to see what I'm physically capable of. I want to push the limits of my own ability and continue to grow and get better and better and better. And then, that was mine. But you see people there that are doing it for all these different reasons. And it's so cool to figure out everybody else's why and why they're doing what they're doing and what inspired them to push themselves for 24 hours. And it could be a small goal or it could be a big goal. Like some people are going out there trying to put 20 miles up and which is still incredible to be on your feet and try to go through this whole process. And then you got the guys out there that are putting up 100, 105 miles. And that's wild. When you start to get to that level of athlete and know what it takes. And until you go through it, you really don't understand what 100, 105 miles looks like. It's wild. So, that Friday night, we're at the venue, get everything set up. We leave, now you got your meal, that big meal that you're prepping for the night before to get a bunch of calories in. And I think that's what I didn't even talk about, but it's really important that build up nutrition wise, that is massive. If you don't have your nutrition planned out, dialed in, getting enough food, getting enough calories, you are in trouble because you're going to get depleted. You're going to be wrecked and physically you're not going to be able to continue. And it's not easy. So, making sure for me at that point, my maintenance calories were probably around 3,600. So I'm at least getting that plus another like 500 to 1,000 calories. So I think that, I tracked it and I forget right now, but I was in that 35 to 4,500 calorie range the night before for that day. And then that morning of trying to get 2, maybe 3 meals in before the race starts at noon. Trying to hydrate, get electrolytes coming in, get sodium intake in, because that's huge. It's a game changer. So we wake up Saturday morning, and this is what's interesting. Again, I brought it up earlier. It's at noon, and most of these races start early. So you're up for 5 or 6 hours before you even get into this race. And now you're in this race at noon, and you got to be awake for 6 hours. The race goes 24, and then you're going to be up more. So minimum, you're up 30 to 36 hours, most likely straight. If you're doing this race without any sleep and you're trying to maximize your actual mileage. So we wake up that morning, we get the fuel in, we get meals in. And I'm not going to go in super depth of all that because I want to talk about more of the experience, but I do get the food in. And then what's crazy is about a half hour before the race starts at 11:30, they have you standing in like a tunnel. So you got the start line right here. Sorry, we got doggy eating stuff. We got doggy eating stuff over here. So we basically get into the race half hour before it, and you're in this tunnel. You're in this little situation where like you're waiting for the race to start. So you're on your feet standing for a half hour before the race while everyone's doing the hype up. They're doing the not Pledge of Allegiance. You're doing the I can't even think when they national anthem. My goodness here. So the national anthem, Pledge and Allegiance. I'm going back to middle school, kindergarten here. So, you got that going on, and you got people sitting, you're just getting ready, and then the race gets ready to start. So after a half hour sitting, and the race goes off at noon, in the first lap, there's no obstacles. So your first lap, again, that 5-mile course, you have no obstacles. So you're just getting in a solid 5-mile run, which I think was averaging about 10-minute mile pace when I did that run, which put me in a good situation. And then on lap 2, the obstacles started to open. They opened a few obstacles in lap 2. So you get, on the mile 5 through 10. And then depending on what distance you got, the obstacles starting opening up on times. So if you're moving faster, you get into this course longer, and you can miss obstacles, which every obstacle you could miss would buy you more time, because you could move obviously faster than performing an obstacle, or you could stay from getting wet a little bit longer. And all this is huge, because as your times add up over that 24 hours, if you have a goal to get 75 miles, you gotta put in decent laps, because you're going to slow down over time. So, getting through the first few laps, felt pretty good. About 15 miles in, my third lap, I got a headache out of the blue. And for me, this is where I think I was a bit dehydrated, and I wasn't eating enough, but mostly hydration and electrolytes, because the race started, it was like 80 degrees. So it wasn't humid, but it was hot, and we're in the sun. So you got this direct sunlight just kind of pounding on you. And this hit a lot of people. I've noticed on the course, a lot of people overheating, sweating, sunburnt, and they didn't plan accordingly. And there was only one spot on the course that there was water. So in a 5-mile loop, you got one spot with water. So you're at a minimum going to be out there an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours at some situations deep into this race. So most people aren't bringing packs out there. So getting enough water at those aid station or the aid station, and when you get around for your loop, getting enough hydration and electrolytes in was massive. And I think that was the undertaking that I didn't realize the importance of it, how important it would be, and getting enough calories in, and forcing yourself to eat these calories and drink this water, even though you didn't want to. So what was useful to me, so we go mile 10, mile 15, mile 20, mile 25. At this point, I was running with my buddy Aaron, and that was huge, because I think having someone to pace you or that is similar speed than you, if you're not going to be the best of the best, or you're not trying to put up like a max number competitively, and you're just trying to see what you're capable of, I think there is value at having someone by your side that's pacing similar to help keep you in a good headspace, to keep pushing you, you push them, and you work with each other to keep on moving. And for the first 25 miles, I had that, and we were making really good time. As the night went on, race started at noon. It started to get dark around that 5, 6 o'clock. Now, this is where it got interesting, and mandatory like headlamps came out. So now you're running with headlamps, obstacles are opening up. Now you're starting to get a lot more wet. You're going through almost, I think 15 to 18 obstacles at this point. and you're going through it. So you're getting wet going through the obstacles. You're starting to get more fatigue. You're starting to see how your times get adjusted. Where my first lap, I was at 50 minutes, and now we're at like an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes per lap, getting all the way to like 2 hours per lap, and so on and so forth as it got deeper into the race. And this is where it got interesting. I think I got to 30 or 35 miles. And I forget what time it was, but I remember feeling decent at that point. And at the 10-hour mark, now, before I go to this 10-hour mark, at I think 6 or 7 p.m., the temperatures were dropping. So you've been sweating all day, you've been hot, 80 degrees and wet. Now you're wet, you're getting cold, the chill's coming out, it's windy. And I think the temperatures were in the low 50s. And it wasn't that it was extremely cold, but being wet, walking in the wind got you cold. And this is where I made the call, I think at 6 or 7 p.m. to go into a wetsuit. And everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but I think 70, 80, 90% of people put wetsuits on because that hypothermia or cold, you want to avoid that. So I had a sleeveless wetsuit I put on, I think at 6 or 7, and I ran with that wetsuit for the next 13 hours. And I never actually ran with a wetsuit going into this. And this is what was crazy is I remember talking to my friends and they're, you going to run in this wetsuit? You going to try this out? And I'm like, like, we'll see how it goes. And I ended up have no training in a wetsuit at all. Didn't even try it. I tried it on, see if it fit, and it felt like pretty good. But overall it felt fine. So we just experimented and hoped for the best, which obviously it worked out okay. The chafing wasn't bad. I didn't really feel that at all. It was honestly just, it was a game changer for me actually to have that on. It was huge. So putting that wetsuit on at like 6, 7 p.m. Was massive. And I'll preference before this, I started in a t-shirt and shorts, and then I went from a t-shirt to long pants and a windbreaker. And then I went into the windbreaker, taking the long pants off, going into the wetsuit. And then so I ran with a long sleeve, a wetsuit, and a windbreaker for the rest of the course, really to the end of the race. But I'll go back to when I hit 10 p.m. I bring that up because my wife and Kat, my uncle that were running my pit, because you have a pit during this too, and I didn't really preference that much, but you need a team to really be optimal with this. It comes down to your nutrition. It comes down to your team. So I had 3 people in my pit that every lap I came around had food ready for me, had nutrition ready for me, trying to hype me up, put me in a good headspace. And that is huge to this race because you can't go back to your pit. You're waiting pretty much at the finish line and they're right on the side waiting for you. Like, hey, what do you need? Let me get you this. You want some goos, you want some gummies, you want electrolytes, drinks, water, food. And they have all that ready for you throughout the race. And at 10 p.m., they're like, you're on fire. Like you're crushing this. You're pacing really well. You're on pace for 90 miles at this point. You're on fire. You're crushing it. And this kind of gave me a big boost. I was feeling good. So I came out there to push and I went back out, came back around for a lap. And when I came around after that hype up they gave me, that was when the wall hit. I got in around 12:30, 1 in the morning from that next lap. And it was just exhaustion. I was nauseous. I was lightheaded. I was dizzy. I was fatigued. And for me to this, I think it was the accumulation of, I didn't hydrate and get electrolytes in early enough. I didn't get enough carbohydrates coming in every hour. And I just basically was undernutritioned to make the best of it. And all that put me into a bad physical state, which that's where my headspace flipped for the entire race. That's where I lost that I'm going to crush this confidence. And I learned the importance looking back now. I started to speak negatively. I started to talk about, I'm never going to reach the 75. And I just went into a very bad headspace. And that's when I basically was in the pit for about 10 to 15 minutes. And Kat, Matt, and my wife are just trying to get me to eat something, trying to put something in my stomach, get some water. And I was hurting. And I literally remember holding a jelly bean. And this is hilarious to say, but they're holding these little caffeine jelly beans and I couldn't even eat one. I just couldn't even eat one. Like I was taking half a bite of a jelly bean because I was, 1, in my head and being negative, 2, like I just didn't feel great. And then I really didn't want to continue. I wanted to quit. I'm sitting there like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore. And I'm getting into an argument, like not yelling, but just, I'm kind of being a dick when they're trying to be supportive, honestly. And I was just mentally not feeling it. So after like 10 minutes and me barely eating, they're like, you need to get up. Like you need to go out in the course. Like this is the turning point of the race. Like you're either going to continue or you're just going to quit. And obviously I didn't want to quit, But if they let me, honestly, this is where the pit crew comes in. If I didn't have a pit crew or they weren't being very blunt of like, you need to move, I would have probably sat there for an hour, maybe 2 hours. And that would have been catastrophic. So the fact that they continued to push me, and the moment I was pissed, I didn't want any part of it. But at the end of the day, that continued to allow me to move forward, to grind, to push forward. And I honestly, when they walked me out of my chair back to the course, I was pissed at them. And I was like, I'm just going to walk this course. And I walked. Honestly, like I say this out loud. I don't like saying this because it makes me feel like a little bitch and it makes me not feel good about myself. And I'm not saying I'm not proud of what I accomplished, but I basically walked 90 to 95% or power walked the rest of this race. And I would say like I jogged some downhills and a tiny bit of flats, but 90% of this race I power walked or walked from basically 1:30 in the morning to 9:30 in the morning when this race ended. And this is the thing. I'm proud that I continued to move forward. I'm proud that I didn't sleep. I'm proud that I continued to do my best at that moment when really I had more. But again, till you're in these situations, your mindset, you don't know what your head's going to do to you. And so we get through this, we go through that night and we get to about 3:30 in the morning. And I remember, a little moment, I'm putting a lap or two in. At this point, we're like 2.5 hour laps. Like we're going pretty damn slow because we're just walking. And I remember getting through another lap. It's like 3:30 in the morning. And they start to give out these little espresso shots. And this is like Coach's Corner, which is where Coach, who is a huge person in OCR, especially, Tough Mudder. And he's the hype up guy. He's the one that's been there for a long time. He has like a DJ booth playing and he's all hyped up. And they had an espresso shot coffee company there at one of their obstacles right kind of in the last couple miles. So I remember getting a hot espresso shot when I'm cold and I'm exhausted. And there was something about that espresso shot that brought a little life back to me. And it took me out of as much of a negative space and made me feel decent. So I remember getting to the pit like 3:34 and about 4 in the morning. I'm like, hey, I want coffee. Can you give me coffee? And, they tried to give me different food choices throughout the race. And, at this point, it went from my initial plan to taking goos and gummies every half hour to I'm barely getting any food in for the full hour. And when I was checking in every 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I wasn't getting enough calories in. I'd maybe have a couple gummies or like some electrolytes, some water, but there was nothing regulated after the first like 25 miles. I just kind of fell off. And that's the mistake that I could make moving forward and adjust with is to have that regulation. I can't bring up enough how important it is to your first 12 hours to make sure your nutrition is dialed in, because if you're not, the next 12 are going to be absolutely fucking brutal. So, after getting the coffee, they get me some coffee. I'm starting to come back to life a little. And I remember walking out at this point, I'll say I didn't bring this up, but at the 10-hour mark, so I'm 10-hour mark for me. But once it got dark at 10 p.m., they started to med check people. So when you walk back out onto the course, you'd have to do like 3 things. 1 was like read a sentence, 2 was to do a matching game, and 3 was a math problem. So if you got any wrong, they would question like your ability to go back out because you're looking for exhaustion, fatigue, you're looking for hypothermia, all these things, because you're pushing your body to the limit and you're trying to last for 24 hours, but really being up for 30, 32, 36 hours at some point. So the next thing is I'm thinking as I get through the night, the sun's coming up at 6:37. And it was daylight savings time. So actually it was an hour later than it should have been. So we were in the dark an hour more than we should have been. Which I should have been, but just expected, I guess. So we get to that morning and I'm hoping the sun brings like life back to me. Cause I think everyone at this night is just kind of grind. And, the amount of people that were out there in the middle of the night compared to the day it was night and day. Like literally, like no pun intended. It was just, there's so many people that just either camped out for the night or slept or rested and then came back in the morning. So you could do this. You don't have to be on the course for 24 hours, but if you don't, your mileage is going to go down. You had to start the race at noon and then you had to at least do a lap after 7 p.m. or finish a lap after 7 p.m. Or I'm sorry, not 7 p.m., 7 a.m. So at noon when the race started, do a lap, and then 7 a.m. the next morning, do a lap. So you could sleep all night, but obviously your mileage is going to get hit, which is a problem if your goal is to put up as many as you can. So yeah, that was like a big thing. But I made it through the night. We got to the sunrise. It did bring me life a little bit back, but I mentally was just in survival mode. This is where like the headspace, which I thought would be my strongest point, went out the damn window. My body was beat up, and tired, but I could have pushed harder. But mentally, I didn't want to do this anymore. I was doing it because I was there, and I was doing it because my team kept saying to go, and I was just because I wanted to hit a certain number. Um, and I got to the 50-mile mark, so that was one of my goals. And then I basically did another lap, hit the 55, and I think around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I went out for one more lap and I did 60. And at this point, I was 22 and a half hours in at the 60-mile mark. And you had 24 hours to do it. And I technically was doing 2 hour plus laps. So it would be over 24 hours, and you couldn't get left on the course. So you had to finish your last lap before the race ended. But what they did is you had up to an hour and a half after 24 hours. So you really had 25 and a half hours to get in for your last lap. So if I went out at hypothetically 22 and a half hours and it took me 2.5 hours and it took 25 hours, I still would have a half hour of leeway. But at that point, I kept saying to myself, I'm proud of what I accomplished. I did 60 miles. I proved to myself that I faced adversity at 12:30 at night, and I didn't sleep, and I made it through the night, and I convinced to myself that I was happy with my performance and I could move on, that I didn't need to do this. And I got Kat and the team on the course supporting me. They found me on the course. They're trying to push me. They're like, you got this. You're doing great. You're looking awesome. And honestly, like with the obstacles, I was doing a lot more than most people, but mentally, I was just bitching and complaining. And once I started speaking that negative into existence, it wasn't about how far I could push and how far I wanted to push and try to fit into the time frame. It all was about just like trying to appease the team and trying to get through it, and honestly like trying to make them proud. And it was tough because I don't think I did as good as I could have done looking back, but in the moment it's a whole different ball game. So I get through that last 60 miles. I have 2.5 hours, technically 3.5 hours left. So I could have got one more lap in, 65 total. But after convincing Kat and talking to Kat, I basically was like, I'm done. And I kept saying, I'm done. And they kept saying, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret this. You have to go back out. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And eventually I just called it. And that was the end. And that was it. I crossed the finish line with 60 miles. I took my medal, got my pictures. And it was interesting because I crossed the finish line and there wasn't as much I did it. Because I think the team, I want to be objective, and this is kind of a little more emotional, is objectively looking at it. I felt disappointed when I finished. And I don't know if I've said this out loud before a ton. And I know they said I was going to regret not pushing the last lap, but I think part of the reason I feel disappointed, and I don't know how much it was pushing that last lap, or I felt like I disappointed the team and I let them down because they knew I could have did more. And they were supportive with to the race, but seeing how they responded to my finish, and this is not blaming them. I think this is honestly supporting them because they know I had a lot in me and I could have done more. And they were supportive when I did finish, but I do feel like they know I had more, and I kind of quit on myself. Looking back on it, and it's tough to look at it like that, but I am proud of a lot of things I did in this race, and I learned so much about myself. But I do feel like I kind of let the team down because they believed in me and they were pushing me. And at the end of the day, like I did put up a good number. But it's tough because you look back at hindsight 2020, and as supportive as the team is, as supportive as everybody is it's hard to understand what you're going through until you're in something like that. And how shocking it was from at 10 p.m. to literally 1 a.m., how different I felt mentally and physically, but mentally specifically, because the body was tired. So, I am so grateful to have them there and the team there, and how appreciative I am that they came to support me. And it's something that I'm hoping that, I've already talked to a few of them. And at this point, I'm going to be going back for next year. And, I know my wife's going to be there. Matt's going to go. Kat's going to actually do it this year. And then I believe I have my buddy Adam, who's going to come out and support me for the race too and help run my pit and, fill Kat's shoes. So, having a team is so important. One of the most important things to have so they can keep you on track from a nutrition standpoint, keep your head in a good space, keep pushing you. And now, reflecting back on it, I realized that, and, I want to make myself proud, but I want my team proud too. I feel like they left it all out there. They've spent all this time and energy flying out to the race. Like, they took time off of work. They're spending their own hard-earned money just to support you. So you owe it to them to empty the fucking tank and put up a huge goddamn number, not just for you, but for them, because they are doing that. So you, at the end of the day, like I said, you do things for you, but you use whatever you need to push, because you want to make yourself proud. You want to make your team proud. So when you finish, there's no regrets, and you feel like you left it all out there. So I think every year you're always going to try to find the negative things that you can improve on. But I think there are times where you can be proud of yourself that you truly set a big goal and you hit it. Where if you set a goal that's a little small, you hit it, but you left some in the tank, I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And I think that's where I, in a way struggled to an extent, because there was self-doubt that I could even hit the 75. And I think that's part of the mental game. So, next year I'm ready to come back for this, and, I'm excited for it. So before I go into like the goals for next year, after this race, we went out to dinner, we ate, and the next day, I knew I was gonna be sore. That night, the soreness started to really kick in. And then the next day, it fucking really kicked in. My ankle and foot and on the right side, so tender. My left knee was hard to bend. Just limping around, trashed from this race because of all the impact. Your elbow joints, your shoulder joints, lats, everything hurts because you're doing monkey bars, you're crawling, you're bear crawling, you're rolling on rocks, you're crawling on rocks, you're swinging from objects, you're dropping into water. There's so much shit going on, and you're trashed. And I took a full week off after that race. I mean, no lifting, no nothing, just barely moving, and I was beat up. So, now at 2 months after this race, it's a good time to really reflect on my experience. And I'm already, so like I said a couple minutes ago, I'm coming back with a vengeance in 2024. It's going to be in outside of Orlando, probably an hour outside of Orlando. It's going to be in Florida this year, November, man, I don't remember the dates, like 7, 8, 9, 10th range. So we had a full year to train. Now we're at like 10 months to train, and I'm coming for 80 miles. I'm coming for my 75-mile belt buckle, my 75-mile Benny, and I'm going to put up 80 plus miles. And if I can get to 80 miles, I should say when I get to 80 miles, it's going to be a hell of a thing. I'm going to be training more. I'm going to be training harder. I'm going to be training longer. I'm getting more runs in, more volume, and we're just going to step it up to a new level. Because I now know what to expect. I now know what I need to do from a nutrition standpoint. I know the preparation that goes into that, from every lap to pre-race to during the race. I know the hydration piece of it. I know the mental game and the approach that you got to have at certain points of this race, whether it's your team being on the same page, your mantras. I can't say this enough. And I think this is the most important part of the mental game. Is you cannot, I repeat, you cannot speak that negative shit into existence. Once you start telling yourself out loud that you can't do this, this is too hard, you don't know if you're going to reach it, and you're saying all these negative things, they're going to compound. And what you say out loud, it becomes your reality. So I would rather you keep saying, like, I'm feeling great, I'm feeling good, I'm confident, I got this, like, I'm strong. Like, say these things, even if you you don't believe it, and subconsciously you're programming this into your head. Just do not, I'd rather you not say anything positive, but just don't speak that negative shit into existence. And that was the thing. Like I said, at mile 10, or 10 hours in, I felt amazing. 3 hours later, it was the end of the fucking world. And that was because I started to speak negative shit out loud, and I played the victim, poor mentality bullshit that I create in my head. And I continued to go, and I'm proud of that, but that broke me. So we can't be broken this time. We will not break. And not breaking, it has to do with what you say to yourself out loud, and you keep moving forward. You do not let your mind break and crush you. At the end of the day, you have to have control of your mind and what you say to yourself. And that is going to take practice. So going into these races, going into your training, getting uncomfortable, challenging yourself, practice not complaining during your runs, before your runs. Focus on the mantras, the positive things you say to yourself, that you can do this, you are strong, you got this. That self-belief, like it's repetitive. You have to train your mind to be in these situations so you can accomplish big things. And that translates to anything in life. So I can't advocate how important that mental preparation is. And a huge good piece of advice I got is to plan everything that could go wrong during one of these races and have a plan how to attack that when it does, and expect everything to hit the fan, because I promise you, everything's going to hit the fan. You could have a potential injury. You could have some type of tweak, some strain. You could have, issues nutrition, and you could, your hydration, or maybe you throw up and you get sick during one of these races. Anything and everything could go wrong, and you have to plan for that and expect it to happen. Obviously, you don't want it to happen, but if you have a game plan how to approach all these things when and if they do happen, it's not going to shock you, and it's not going to, get you anxious and nervous, because that anxiety and anxiousness and stress is only going to fatigue you and make your life a lot harder out on that course, because you want to conserve as much energy as you can. And the more stress that you have on your body, physically, mentally, emotionally, it's very taxing, and it's going to take a lot of energy away from you on the course. So you don't want to be too high. You don't want to be too low. You got to live right in this middle point, because if you're too excited, you're draining yourself of energy. If you're too complaining and negative and stressed and you're freaking out over everything, you're going to exhaust yourself mentally and physically. So staying even kill, not being too high and too low, is a huge part of these endurance races, which I'm beginning to learn and that I can take and learn from going into next year. So I hope that's helpful, because that's probably one of my most important things that you can do other than training and nutrition. So, like I said, guys, I'm excited for next year. I'm going to be doing World's Toughest 2024, 80 plus miles. We're going to crush that fucking shit. And then in, what is it? My first race though, April 2024. So we're looking at like 4 months. Oh, no, not even. Looking at like closer to 3.5 months at this point. We're doing a Spartan Ultra in New Jersey, same race as last year. Last year I did this race, which is 30 miles, 60 obstacles, about 10,000 feet elevation. I did this in 10 hours and 5 minutes. I'm going sub 9.5 as a goal this year. So 9 hours and 30. And we'll see what we can do. If we can do better, amazing. But we're going to push and try to break that and see what past that we can potentially do. And then as of now, I have nothing for 6 months after that. We're just going to build up our training going into World's Toughest, save money, get stuff together, and get ready to roll. So I'm excited for 2024. A lot of big things to come, and I can't wait to see what we can accomplish. And I'm excited because I have another Kat's going to be doing it. Friend of mine, she's a fucking beast. So we'll see what she can do. I have a new pit crew, Adam, coming down with me. I have, other friends that I've met doing this race. So now I'm part of the community a bit more, to talk to them, to communicate with them, do podcasts with them that I've done a few already. They're inspiring me. They're pushing me. And I'm excited to see what we're capable of in 2024. So one thing I want to say, guys, you'll hear me say it all the time, is chase discomfort. At the end of the day, this 2024, I really want you to chase discomfort. I want you to set a goal that scares you a little bit. I want some type of physical fitness goal. I want you to challenge yourself to do a race, a 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathon, or maybe you do a powerlifting competition. Maybe you have a big weight loss goal that you want to shoot for. Maybe you want to get in the best shape of your life and there's something you want to plan. But I really, really want to challenge you to set a goal for the end of this year that you can be proud of yourself that you accomplished. And I want it to be something that scares you. Be a little bigger than you're normally willing to challenge yourself to, that scares you a little bit, because once you pick a goal that scares you a little, that's an exciting thing. You're scared because you're excited, you're nervous. Can I accomplish it? But that means if you do this and when you do accomplish this goal, how fucking good you're going to feel when you do it and proud of yourself. It's so worth the months and months and months and months of challenge and adversity. So I really want you to do that in 2024, set a massive goal, and then go out and crush it. So have a good day, everybody. Till next time, chase discomfort, keep being a fucking beast, and I'll talk to you guys later.